Welcome to Get in the Herd. This is a recovery podcast from the McShin Foundation. That intro just pumped me up. I love it. I feel like we're on NFL game day or something like that. I am Alex Bond. I am a peer leader and house leader here at the McShin Foundation. I'm here with my good buddy, Nathan Mitchell, who has been traveling across America, spreading love and hope and, just getting it done for Addiction Across America. Is that right, Nathan?
That's right, Alex. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Anybody who's been watching the show, can you anybody know where I am right now? Do you know where I am, Alex?
I'm gonna guess Dallas, Texas.
I got here around 11:30 this morning, and I met with some amazing people that I'm eager to share that information on my page. But just had a wonderful conversation. Bear with me. I'm outside in a beautiful little park right next to a little coffee shop, and we are right in the middle of the city. So you're going to hear airplanes. They're not dumpsters going across the street. We might hear a siren or two. This is authentic recovery right here. One of the women I just spoke with has like 32 years of recovery. And so that was a really empowering conversation and hopeful conversation. And so I'm here in Dallas. I'm going to walk around after this call because I just got here. I've never been to Dallas before. And then this afternoon, I'm going to go meet up with my sister, probably. She's out in Denton, about 20 minutes, or I don't know. She's not in Dallas, and go from there.
So how are you meeting these people? So this lady with 32 years in recovery, how did you just stumble upon meeting her and striking up a conversation?
Man, I know people. I know people who know people. Well, so that's a good question. So when I decided to do this, to just travel, I reached out to some people I know who do, work across the country, and starting right in our, in our own backyard, Honesty and John and Jesse, asking about who their contacts are and who do they know. And then I work with, I've been working with Joseph Hogan Sanchez with Faces and Voices of Recovery, who runs the Association of Recovery Community Organizations, ARCO. And he's put me in touch with a lot of people. Michael King, who does the Communities Project. I think you've met him before, Alex, maybe not, but he does advocacy training, and he's put me in touch. He put me in touch with Becky and Beth today. And I've also been working with the Recovery Advocacy Project, which is Ryan Hampton and Garrett and I'm forgetting his name, darn it. Ryan's fiance. I'm sorry. Sean O'Donnell. Sean, yeah, thank you. Sean, Ryan's better half. So,
sorry, I turned up the wrong mic there.
But yeah, so I opened it up, and when I was on a call yesterday with Recovery Month planning, we Honesty actually put it out there that I was doing this, so we opened it up, and a bunch of people flooded my message box yesterday, and I'm actually going to stop and visit some people in Midland, Texas, on my way out west towards California. So yeah, just meeting people as I go.
So it's just like reaching out to your network and them reaching out to their network and saying, you should see this person, you'd link up well with this person. And I do know Ryan, and we did a pod with Michael King, I think, one time.
You were on that. That's right.
Really solid guy. So that's really cool because, it's one thing to hear all these stories just by listening to them, but actually getting to have a heartfelt, eye-to-eye, face-to-face conversation, especially in, today's global pandemic scenario, isn't exactly easy. Have you had to take any certain precautions? Has that been harder than you expected? I mean, what have your expectations been met thus far?
Well, here's the thing, Alex, expectations are premeditated resentments. And I know that from my own recovery, and that doesn't mean I don't make expectations. It just means that I know what happens when I know what can happen when I make expectations. So I knew there were going to be challenges before I left. And right before I left, COVID really had a resurgence, and I knew that the challenges would increase. And I said, you know what, torpedoes be damned, I'm going to go. And I did, and yes, there have been a few people who didn't want to meet with me, or I've talked to over Zoom and recorded conversations. There are a few people, I didn't get to see the organization from the inside because they're currently closed or they're not accepting new people. However, the people, even the people I wasn't able to meet, the people I have met have all been encouraging and welcoming and gracious, and just trying to find a way to work with me to talk and have a conversation, because really, we're all figuring this out at the same time. And there's been some really cool ideas that other people are doing, other organizations that, never would have crossed my mind. And that may or may not be good for McShin and for other places too. So I'm encouraged by just the graciousness that I've been shown as I go around the country.
No, that's great, because I can imagine that even the people who are saying, this might not work out under these circumstances, but I do know this person who can help out. And a lot of times, especially in as people in recovery, it is I'm just laughing at Ben Kramer's comments. It is, people in recovery are a lot more susceptible to understand where we're coming from. So it's like, I know how important that face-to-face conversation is. So I will go out of my way a little bit, even, maybe not in the safest scenarios possible, to make sure that I do what it takes to get the message across to someone, or to get the message received from someone.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and I think you probably practice a program of recovery like I do, which demands that connections are the opposite of recovery for me. And, finding new ways to make connections, to continue the connections I have, is important for me to make in my recovery, because I have a disease that wants me to isolate. And not only do I have a disease that wants me to isolate, I've put myself in a prime position. I've literally put myself in a prime position to give my disease an excuse to continue to isolate, by being out on the road alone, by being in hotel rooms alone, and sort of, putting myself in what has been a few times triggering situations, for my own experience. So it's very much a very personal recovery journey for me. And I as much as I want to be giving, as I go, I know that I'm taking way more than I give. And, that's to me, the way the program works for me. So I love that. I had what's that?
No, keep going. You go for it.
So my ADD is going crazy because there's a really cute dog over here. And I want him to come over here. Beautiful white, I don't know what it is, but beautiful. And oh, by the way, I wanted to say, hey, Ben Kramer, shout out to you. You're my man. You're my favorite person. Not my man, but you know what I mean.
My boo. That's better.
To be fair, Ben, I probably give you more attention than most people, you and Brian, because I send you pictures all the time as I go along. And Alex.
Yeah, the picture of the pupper was good. I wanted to segue into how our disease makes us want to isolate, and even our symptoms of our disease, even though we have sustained clean time, still have to deal with isolation, like going to jail, which I had to do. And I just got out, and it's great. And it was very weird and bizarre. But, you're in a situation where you chose to not necessarily isolate, but be on your own and kind of have to fend for yourself, reach out to your network and stay productive and busy. So it's almost kind of like a challenge. I was forced to do that challenge. And, a lot of people were, oh, it'll be easy. You could do that standing on your head. And it's like, okay, well, why don't you go into a pod for 23 and a half hours by yourself? I mean, it was a lot more intense than I expected.
I don't think I can pixelate out those, fingers,
no,
flying fingers.
Blur
there.
out the.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll just say fuck them.
No, but that's a tough situation to be in, and I know you've been in that situation before. So, like, how did you handle You're pretty transparent about your time that you've had to spend in jail, and I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate on how you got through that without succumbing to that isolation. Because I started spinning out for like one day because I thought I was in there for too long. I'll be stuck in there forever. What if I'm like, I had a vision of me getting out of jail and then just like blinking and I'm at a bar with a beer in my hand, and I was like, oh no, that sounds terrifying. So I like immediately called people when I got out and everything. So I was just kind of wondering what your experience was.
Yeah. Well, the first time I spent time in jail, I didn't get out with the idea that I had a problem. I was there and spent the entirety of those 18 days, I think it was the first time, blaming everybody else and making sure that everybody knew that it was their fault and their problem, and I had nothing to do with it. So, but also not wanting to go crazy, completely anyway. That little bit of time, that first time, one of the positive ways of working through that situation for me is to create routines. And it's funny because I'm the opposite. Well, I'm not the opposite. I know that routines can make me stagnant and complacent, but I also know that routine connects me to something. So like there has to be a balance for me. And, jail is necessarily, the imbalance of routine versus non-routine. And then you have to, subscribe to somebody else's routine. But I can do for myself, making sure I made my bed, which I do now. Even in the hotels I've stayed at, I still make my bed in the morning. It's part of
cool.
Well, it's part of my gratitude ritual, and I didn't want to give that up. But the second time I went to jail, I was pretty dark for the first couple weeks, and really didn't want to have anything to do with anybody or anything except I was just telling Beth and Becky, that I would talk to some people sideways here and there, hoping that they would hurt me, hoping that they would hit me so that I could feel something other than what I felt. But when I went into, this isn't necessarily a shill from the McShin program, but of course this is a McShin. When I went into the McShin pod at jail, I started creating, healthier routines. I made my bed. I did a lot of reading. Both recovery related and non-recovery related. I have some pretty deep passions for history and for music and really a lot of different things. I have a lot of interests. So, I read okay. So here's something funny that I don't tell many people. Well, two things. One, I wrote a lot. Actually, I wrote a lot the first time I was in jail too. I wrote because I'm an addict, right? I started to write a play, and I said, well, I can't just write one play. It has to be a series. It has to be a
trilogy.
It has to be a trilogy, exactly. So So I've sketched out 9 acts of 3 plays, and I've written 1 full scene. So
just bits and pieces of different things like that. That's how I write a lot of times. Is I'll just be like, all right, a verse of this, a verse of that, a verse of that, and I won't finish anything.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I know, and you're a prolific writer, and I know that you're really good. Your rap skills are on point, at least as far as this 44-year-old is concerned, right?
Well,
I also spent a lot of time writing. Poetry is not really my thing necessarily. I say that, but then the right poetry, but I'm not a prolific writer of poetry, I should say, except for limericks. I like limericks. They're cheesy, they're silly, but I wrote a lot of limericks, and I what I would do, I would do random art. I did a lot of random little art crafts and projects when I was in jail. I would tear up magazines or books. We had this one book of. I destroyed this book, but it was really beautiful. It had all this cultural stuff in there. I don't know. I made all these little art projects, and I would leave random shit around the pod, and just to make somebody smile or laugh when they would see it. I don't know.
I get that. I would start to do funny voices. I made paper cranes. I was like writing in my head, but again, I was in an elevated scenario where I was in an isolated pod for 23, and because of this coronavirus, I was in a pod. And the pod had 48 cells in it that everyone was in for 23 and a half hours. So for half an hour a day, everyone could come out in the day room and take a shower, make a phone call, and that was pretty much it. So aside from that, we were relegated to our individual 8x12 room for the 23 and a half hours of the day. And being there for, the minimal time that I didn't have any of that stuff. I had whatever I was given, and I didn't have a pen. Like a lot of that stuff, I had to get creative. I had to make paper cranes and take toothpaste to a mirror and aim spitballs to play darts and stuff like that. And and maybe it's not the most productive in the world, but it kept me away from kind of those deep-seated thoughts of like, oh, this is what recovery gets me. I get all this clean time, and then I get stuck in jail dealing with this. And then I looked around and I was like, no, this is exactly what active addiction got me. Sustained recovery is that minute that I walk out and I'm still clean and get to come back here and hit the ground running, putting out fires and saying, we missed you, and all this other, valuable stuff. And
we missed you. Now we need you to get to work.
Spot on. And I love it. And it definitely makes me feel valued, which is what helps me stay clean, because when I didn't have a lot of self-worth is when I was the worst in my addiction. It wasn't usually isolation or loneliness as much as it was just me feeling pitiful for myself.
Yeah. I'm really proud of you, Alex. And I'm glad you got out and made a call. And in fact, I wasn't kidding when I said to you, I texted you earlier and I said I hadn't heard from you. I thought you were ignoring me. And then I talked to Todd and he was like, oh yeah, that's right. So I'm glad that it was a short amount of time.
Oh yeah, definitely. Okay. But it meant a lot to have these text messages like to get when I got out, because I saw, a couple pictures that you sent me and I was like, man, I'm so happy that Nathan's just cruising across America, still doing his thing, like keeping it moving. And, the backdrop's beautiful. You got a nice bright smile. I mean, I'm really happy that this is going successfully. What are some future game plans that you have, I guess, in the next week? I think we'll be talking to you again next week, right, Todd?
Yeah, probably.
I want to do this as a weekly. We obviously had a lapse, but I definitely want to do this as a weekly with Nathan. I think it's important. I mean, he's got a great story going on here, a great storyline. So, but sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, absolutely. So I was just wondering, I guess, what the game plan is for what we can check on next time.
Well, so hey, so first of all, Alex, are you done with your jail shit? You done with court and jail for now?
No.
Get on a plane and meet me in San Diego in a week.
Oh my gosh, that sounds wonderful. Do you know how nice a vacation on a San Diego beach sounds? San Diego, Spanish for.
I gotta tell you, when I was in Houston a couple days ago, and Houston is about an hour away from Galveston, which is right on the Gulf of Mexico. And I said, all right, I need to get some footage of me at the beach at the Gulf of Mexico. I've been to the Gulf of Mexico from Florida before. And from Mississippi. I was there in Biloxi. But I said I need to get some footage so that it matches the footage I took when I was in Virginia Beach, which you haven't seen yet. And so I went down to Galveston, went to the beach, took the footage, got in the car, and went back to Houston. That's how dorky I am. I didn't even spend it.
You have free time to do cool stuff like that. I mean, that's exactly what this opportunity is for.
The danger and Joseph Hogan Sanchez, who I spent a night at his house with his husband Todd 2 nights ago. I was talking to him about that, and I realized that I'm sometimes I'm not experiencing the experience, if that makes sense. I'm collecting the experience. I'm observing the experience, and there's sometimes where I feel a detachment, and I've been struggling a little bit with that. Part of that is because up until yesterday, almost everywhere I had been was a place I had visited at some point in the past. So sometimes it was reliving old memories. I'm still dealing with family. There's other things going on in my life that I haven't shared, and I'm not going to share because it's personal to other people in my family. Mm-hmm. But there's some stuff going on that's got me a little out of my square. I'm really pulling the tools that I have in recovery and working with my network.
Good.
And I'll talk to you about it later. You'll be interested. But What happens next for me though is that last night, last night marked the first time leaving Austin meant that everywhere I go after Austin, I have never been before. If that
Good.
makes sense. Now, everywhere I've stopped along the way, since I got here, and I'm just about to hit 3,000 miles, by the way. But everywhere I've stopped, not everywhere I've stopped I've been, but many of the places I've stopped I have been before. So this launches the next wave, and I'm going straight out west. I've never been out west. I'm looking forward to seeing completely different countrysides. I'm really looking forward to the Pacific Coast Highway, which I think is San Diego to San Francisco, I think. But I'm riding the whole coast. I'm looking forward to spending more time experiencing the experiences and not just sort of, hey, what's next? Hey, what's next? Hey, what's next? Which has been,
like sticking to the itinerary and making sure that you knock all those things off of the checklist instead of, as you're saying, experience the experience, because that is, for, not to like cut you off, but one of the main reasons I don't take a lot of pictures, honestly. Like I just don't, for some reason. My dad and I have had debates with this. He's like, well, don't you want to, be able to look at them and remember those experiences and look back and think, man, I'm glad I did that. And if it's important enough, it'll get stored in there and I'll get to bring it up for a rainy day. And, I don't have to think about, I get to think about the feelings that I had in that experience, not what it looked like. You know what I'm saying? I can think of how it smelled and how it felt and what the music was like and the sounds, like, something as simple as an ambulance and a pretty backdrop of a hotel is like warm to look at, but it feels a lot different where you are than how it looks to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think I'm really excited for you to experience those new experiences, but I can imagine it's probably a little more of a scary thing. Was it something that you kind of planned, like, okay, at Austin, I'm just going to let the training wheels off, or is that just kind of like how it ended up?
Well, it's I'm hitting places things I have always wanted to do. It's funny you say, things that aren't, they're stored in my memory, right? Like the smell of my grandmother's kitchen, right? That's a distinct, and it's I will occasionally get a whiff of that. It's essentially the gas that was in the stove. But it's I can every once in a while smell that, and it reminds me of that spot. And that's not something I can photograph or replicate. Well, I can replicate it, but it's not something I look to replicate. It just sort of happens every once in a while. And the same thing with sounds, or food. My goodness, I have eaten so well in Texas. Well, I've eaten so well on this trip.
Anthony Bourdain would be proud.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, I had I spent a whole day last Saturday with Dan Schneider, the pharmacist.
Mm-hmm. So you did get to link up with him?
Oh yeah, we spent a whole day together.
Good.
We spent in fact, if you see, I'm I'm really, really tan. It's primarily because of him, which is a good thing. We walked around forever. We saw a lot. And then he took me, we had two women, two mothers who had just lost children to this disease. One woman who had lost her son about 4 months ago, and another one who had just a little over a year. And so the five of us, one woman had her boyfriend. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The five of us went and drove around a lot of the places that are in the pharmacy, in the show. But then we also drove around to some other places in New Orleans, and he lives in the North Shore of Lake Pontchartrain. And we went to dinner and, late lunch, I guess. And it was one of those meals. This is my favorite way to eat, Alex. My favorite way to eat is to just walk in and have serving me food. I mean, I'll pay and stuff like that, but it's like I don't want to order food. If I'm somewhere where people cook, I want to experience what your favorites are. And so it was one of those. I walked in, we sat down, and like they brought us gumbo. amazing gumbo, right? And I remembered, which I'd kind of forgotten, but the last time I was in New Orleans was 20 years ago. And I can tell that story here. So the last time I was in New Orleans 20 years ago,
quick pulse check.
I had to think about it. I was in Atlanta, Georgia in November of 2000, right? So when the election happened, and if you remember the 2000 election, Gore and Bush, there was a lot of controversy.
Yeah.
But the election that night, I was at a queer conference for queer advocates, LGBTQ advocates, although it was just lesbian and gay advocates at the time. And so we were at this thing, and Gore won. We thought, we went to bed, we woke up, and then crazy. So anyway, my boss and I at the time, that might have been a little too much. Well, anyway, a person I know and I, and her,
you can't redact something that's live on the air, dude.
Let's just, you know what? I can say this, okay? We couldn't fly from, we planned to go to New Orleans for like 6 days, and we got a place, but we couldn't fly there because of what we had with us.
Okay.
So, yeah. And so we white knuckled it, me being, I was 24, I think at the time. So, and I was a little clean cut, not so flaming, but I was a little clean cut gay boy. We had a pretty flaming game boy with us, a really, really, really uber dyke lesbian, love you, and her girlfriend who was a lipstick lesbian. And so, we did not look like we belonged on the back roads of Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi. So we white knuckled it the entire time. And so, of course, we didn't take a lot of pictures because and we got to New Orleans, but I remember that trip. Well, I don't remember a lot from that trip, but what I remember is two things. The music, first of all, the music everywhere we went, right? Everywhere we went, there was good music, even on the street. And that happened when I was there just a few weeks ago, or a couple days ago, whatever it was. There was still music. There was nobody in New Orleans, though. And the food, anybody who's been to New Orleans says the same thing. I think is that the food and the music are the two most amazing parts of New Orleans, and everything I ate in New Orleans, and that was the same thing when I was there just now, a couple of days ago, or a week and a half, whatever it was, week and a half ago. The food was just incredible. The music was awesome. We stopped. I stopped at I went down to the French Quarter. I went and got I went to the French Quarter just so that I could get a sticker for Brian Merritt because I promised him something. And but that was I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did that because I kind of had the place to myself really, and there were still people playing music, and I sat and had coffee and beignets, Café du Monde, and I tried to get into the staff meeting, but we I don't know, Honesty and Moses and I got stuck in another Zoom call, just the three of us.
Another dimension with just you three.
And I had the St. Louis Cathedral behind me in the background, and then I turned around. I'm like, "Here's the Mississippi River," and that was that. And then,
no blue screen necessary.
No blue screen necessary. But the rest of this trip, man, I've got points along the way. Like I am meeting some people in. I think I'm gonna meet a girl. Darn it, her name is Francine McDermott. Darn it. Anyway, a woman in San Francisco. I may meet a guy in Los Angeles, but California's kind of getting hit right now, and I don't want to. I'm not so much worried about myself at this point, but I've been around a lot of people, and even though I'm trying to practice as best I can, precautions. Who knows?
You can only do so much, exactly.
But I'm eager to see him. Hoping I get to see Michael King in Seattle. And I haven't met any. I don't know. Actually, I need to talk to you about this afterwards. But I might need some help finding some people. In Oregon to talk to about a law that they're trying to pass there that is very similar to it's close to what's going on in Portugal right now. It's kind of that Portugal model, that Portugal flip that John keeps talking about, which I'm a firm believer in. So I want to talk.
So they're planning on doing it just to get a quick elevator pitch on it. They're essentially trying to do a Oregon flip. where they're just going to decriminalize all drugs in Oregon, is what I'm hearing.
You know more than I do already. I mean, yeah, I knew that, but so you know a lot. All right, good.
No, I'm just getting a pulse check because that's what it sounds like, and I've heard rumblings, that sort of thing. I don't want to say on air that is what it is, but that's kind of like, to my knowledge, what it sounds like. It wouldn't surprise me because Oregon, if I recall correctly, was, by a very small margin of minutes, the actual first state to, I think, legalize pot in their state, or cannabis. I think cannabis is the preferred nomenclature. But I know it was Oregon and Colorado were very, very close. So, they're pretty clearly one of the more progressive states. So it would be wild if they actually did try to pull something off in a state level like that. I think it could be really impactful.
I think it's up for vote by the public in the election. I need to do some research on this, but okay. I want to see what's going on with that and see how that could work, bring in something like that to Virginia. Maybe not now, but it was no time like the present. So I just
it'll follow the same trajectory that the cannabis industry has. It would be, your progressive states will decriminalize, then legalize, and then the same domino effect, and then Virginia will be the last one to decriminalize, and then Virginia will finally, maybe recreationally legalize in 20 years, and then maybe within 50 years we could see a USA flip. I'm not trying to be cynical or pessimistic, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I think it takes a lot of moving parts, and everybody wants their piece of the freaking pie at the end of the day. Who gets paid is what it really comes down to.
Well, and it's I asked about this. I asked John about this a couple months ago, and I think maybe Ryan, but Hampton. It might have been Ryan Hampton, but
they know more about it than I do.
Yeah, well, so I look at the in 2000 I was working for the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, and I was young and did not really understand what it was I was doing. I'm grateful I had the experience. I'm grateful that it left a little bit of a seed in me. I didn't progress in my political activism really a lot more until later, 20 years later. However, it left some seed in me. But I remember at the time, this was 2000. I remember that we were at the time celebrating Howard Dean, and Vermont, the Vermont Supreme Court at the time had made it didn't make gay marriage legal. What it did was it said you have to create something that was similar, that was the same, but not necessarily a name. So what they did was they created something called civil unions in Vermont, and big deal at the time because there were some domestic partnerships in some locations around the country. Some of the states were just thinking about adopting domestic partnerships. Some may have had them. Some of them were progressive, but that was 20 years ago. And at the time, like, nobody in queer politics was thinking that we could ever get gay marriage. There were people on the fringes who thought, hey, we're going to work at this. But for the most part, even the people I worked with, even some of the people I worked with were like, nah, that's a lost cause. Maybe we'll get that in 30 or 40 years, right? That was thinking from people who knew a lot of information at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there was a court case in 1998, I think. It was Texas versus Loving. I'm in Texas now, actually, but Texas versus Lawrence versus Texas, excuse me. And it was a sodomy law, the Texas sodomy laws, and it was two men having consensual sex in their own private home, and they were arrested and brought to trial and then convicted. And so, what that case ended up moving to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court effectively said, well, that's that's not good, that you can't do that. And that was Justice Kennedy, who was a Republican nominated justice. But that was a landmark case in the gay rights movement because it
SCOTUS sets precedent. Yeah,
it knocked away all the sodomy laws all across the country, and that was a good paving the way towards full equality, for gay marriage. But we didn't think about it at the time. So there weren't a lot of people working on that. And it really took, what was it, 2014, I think, when gay marriage actually became the case, and it took it took a lot of different things, but initially it took a really nasty battle in California, and that was 2008. So I think it was 2010 when we got anyway.
Well, I guess kind of
cases, and I look at Roe versus Wade. I look at Texas versus Virginia, Loving versus Virginia, Texas v. Lawrence. I look at Brown versus the Board of Education. So I look at these different landmark cases that really shifted the way we look at major deals in this country, and I wonder where is the recovery movement's landmark case, and that makes me think, well, we got to make sure we protect the Supreme Court, because there's going to be cases coming up. I mean, addiction, we know, is a disease, but we continue to treat addiction as a criminal justice issue. So when we continue to treat a criminal justice issue as instead of a public health care issue, we continue to put people in jail. We continue to deplete resources the wrong way. Blah 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 blah. You know what I'm saying?
Well, anyway. Yeah, and I guess what I hear in all those examples are civil liberties being violated. Yeah. And so it takes a civil liberty to be violated for someone to say, no, you can't do that anymore. And then precedent gets set, and then laws get changed and written and amended and what have you. But there are civil liberties. It's such a more financial and infrastructural and healthcare problem than it is a civil liberty problem. And those sort of problems don't get solved as quickly as civil liberty problems. I don't want to open up like a huge debate and say like, oh, this is going to be harder than gay marriage, because gay marriage was huge. It was foundational. It took a lot of activism. I'm not trying to discredit that in any sort of capacity. I just think as a born skeptic, there is more money involved in the drug industry than there might be in the queer community. Does that make sense?
No, you actually, yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. You've got the criminal justice, if we can call it justice. We've got
exactly
the corporate criminal, institution, incarceration model. We've got judges being freaking, having their retirements, tied to jails, and how much money they make, which is absolutely obscene. The judge that sentenced me in Virginia, in Warrenton, he had a license plate that said, I think it said 1 million years or something like that. Like he had a goal of getting a million years of people people in jail. It's ridiculous. That sort of rampant, yeah, anyway.
And that's the sort of stuff that we'd have to lean on to get these laws actually changed, is those civil liberties being violated, which, again, very pessimistic and morbid, but it's like we have to find those cases, exploit them, and say, when is this going to stop? You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's what stuff like the Black Lives Matter movement has done well, has said, we won't stand for this anymore, has used these examples. I'm trying to read that.
Yeah.
It says,
that's completely right, Gwen.
Yeah, it says one major issue is politicians who want to be seen as tough on crime, and in some states, judges are elected.
Yeah, and I think that the more that people with substance use disorders are not treated like criminals, then we will see a change in a huge level. And I think that starts on a very basic level of, it'd be great to see how close Oregon does get on some sort of USA flip. And I think that could be a really cool pulse check at the end of the day. I'm no political analyst. I'm just a skeptic.
Yes, honesty. I'm working on it. I'm having some what's the word I'm looking for? I'm having technical difficulties. Uploading the video for whatever reason. I can't. I need a ridiculously. I'm having difficulties. So
I would recommend that you change the format from 4K to 1080p, and then your videos will upload smoothly because you won't need the bandwidth.
Yo, about the troubleshoot on the pod right now.
Yeah, that's where it's coming from because it's 4K footage.
Nathan, have you tried unplugging it and plugging it back in?
I actually already knew that Todd was going to tell me that because he told me that before, and I'm hard-headed, and I'm like, no, I'm going to do it in 4K. What's the point of owning a 4K camera if you don't fucking do it in 4K? But, you know,
tech talk with Todd over here. So.
Tech talk with Todd corner.
What's the point of trying to get this video uploaded if you can't do it? So yeah, I get it. But it does. It takes So it takes it takes multiple systems, multi-system change to affect what we want to do overall, and that's really to bring this disease to its knees. And it starts with I met with Beth and Becky today, right? And they're on a drug prevention organization here in Texas, and both of these are two women in long-term recovery, and they run this organization, and their prevention message isn't about, hey, don't do drugs, or, oh my goodness, these are the horrible things that happen when you do drugs. Their prevention message doesn't even discuss drugs that much. When they were telling me how they do this, it's about creating purpose. It's about making sure that people feel valued. It's about making sure that children, and this is towards children, children have a safe space to fully embrace an idea of, you know what, I don't need drugs to hide from my life because I have value in my life, and we talk about, so much of addiction, can go right back to early childhood trauma. And so to be able to work at that level in that way with prevention, I really admire the two of them and want to really observe that model for me, because I don't know anything about prevention. I remember what prevention was like when I was a kid in the 80s. And it was Reagan and don't do drugs. And I know things have morphed. I know things have changed. And I'm on a couple of coalitions that are dedicated to prevention. So, I have seen some other awesome things. I'm glad to be a recovery voice on those coalitions. However, our voices will often get, stumped out by the people who are still have that idea of lock them up and throw away the key. Mm-hmm. The threat of jail is not going to prevent me from using drugs. It never did, and it's not going to continue to prevent me from using drugs. What's going to prevent me from using drugs is finding a life worth living free from drugs and alcohol, and to show that message of to prevention is I think pretty powerful. And if we can start there, and create systems where, okay, well, you didn't get that message when you were young, but you know what? Here's another chance. Here's a life worth living, which is where we are.
Rephrase it, repurpose it, reapply it, and retool it. Because, again, I'm glad that you mentioned Beth and Becky. I like focusing on the positive. I don't like dwelling in the negative too much. I can get caught there very easily. Yeah. But, when we were at a conference in Roanoke,
yeah.
What I'm going to say is a guy stood up and he spout all these facts that were very manipulative about what the cannabis industry has done to Oregon and how it's affected people. And, as soon as he said gateway drug, I immediately rolled my eyes into the back of my head so hard that you would have thought I was the Exorcist, because it's just such an outdated term. If marijuana is a gateway drug, then so is milk by that standard. I mean, I just don't understand how we're still getting caught in these same traps and buzzwords and taboos and things like that. So, keep fighting the good fight.
Sorry, I'm back.
I was just saying, just keep fighting the good fight, and we'll just keep focusing on the positive and the successes. And apparently, after a while, I think it'll drown out the other stuff. What were you gonna say?
Well, it's funny you said milk is a gateway, but I mean, the reality and the evidence suggests that really sugar is the gateway drug. And I can see that in my own life and how that material. Oh my gosh, it's so. I love this little park. I'm so ADD right now, but there's this little squirrel just sitting up here right now. But as sugar as the gateway drug, but we don't spend enough time teaching our kids and I don't know. I'm not going to go on a prevention thing because it's not my sphere. It's not my sphere. I do know that what happened, when I was young didn't work for me. So you're right. Thank you, Debbie. You're right. Positive. That's exactly right. Making sure that we are faces and voices. I can't wait for you guys to see Beth and Becky right now, and I keep talking about them because I just had them here. But so everybody I've met along this path, I've just been absolutely, dedicated to doing something, positive. Creating a change that is long lasting and positive. And it's not about, hatred, and then it's not about anger. It's not about fear. It's about conquering those fears. And I think this part of this journey for me is conquering fear, and it's little fear. I mean, I don't know if he's watching or not, but my dad, my dad worked on engines, on airplane engines, when I was a kid. And that's what he did. He was in the Navy. He worked on F-14s and A-6s, and I don't know anything about engines. I look at my car and I'm like, okay, and so I approach something very as basic as dealing with car issues from a position of fear that goes right back to feelings of no relationship with my dad. I mean, it's like I can look at this and be like, oh my God, are you serious? Daddy didn't play ball with me. So that's how it is with me. And I've identified that situation. So when I get to those things, and that's what's happening with me on this trip, I've had a couple of times where I had to stop and get things taken care of. So, on the car, and instead of me I will still catastrophize in my mind for a minute, but learning the tools of recovery that doesn't take me to that little child, who just wants his daddy to teach him stuff, to just breathing and appreciating where I am at the moment and saying, where are my feet? And I'm going to be where my feet are, and I think that's as simple as just those little fears and conquering those on this trip, learning to do maybe things that other people already know how to do, that I just never figured out or just never did. I mean, I didn't drive. I lived in the city for a long, long time. And I never owned a car. So it's a thing, and when I did own a car, I didn't take care of shit, but now it's like, okay, if I want to drive across the desert for 2 days or 3 days,
you got to change your oil and rotate the tires.
Of course. So yesterday I took the car. I had a slow leak in two of the tires actually, and I took the car, and I knew I needed an oil change, right? And so of course they try to sell me on this and this and this, and I was kind of annoyed that I went where I went and not to where I wanted to go. That's another story. But
your dirty laundry. Name names. I want names, Nathan. You're being so secretive today, and we need to start taking down these people.
Well, it's not secretive. It's just, I went to the Firestone place, where they do tires instead of going to NTB. And, I went to NTB in Richmond when I got my spark plugs done, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And, the experience was helpful. It was not in any way sort of, I didn't feel blame or shame as I left, because, when I left yesterday, they're like, well, you need to get the timing belt redone, and it's going to be $1,300, and you need 6 hours. And I'm like, my eyes are like, I don't have $1,300 or 6 hours, or, they're like, it has to be checked every 75,000 miles. And I'm like, I Googled it. And of course, because, in my head, I'm going to blow up in the car, somewhere in the middle of the desert. and I Googled it, and like, sure enough, it should be something I check between 90 and 110,000 miles. Well, I'm at 119,000 miles right now. So I was like, fuck. I don't know when it was last changed. And I'm like, if that breaks, the car's gone. And I'm like, I just have to put it to acceptance, because I'm like, I don't have $1,300 to play with.
And you're stuck in the desert.
Yeah. What's the worst that can happen, So.
Well, yeah. And it's funny how you mention a lot of those experiences, because one of the things that I have seemed to overvalue, I think, is intelligence. I think that if I can't do something, it's because I'm dumb, or I'm bad at it, or I'm incompetent at it, not because I literally haven't tried to do it or anything like that. So, a lot of things kind of came easily to me. So the more that I try new things out, I expect them to come easily to me. Things are just supposed to get handed to me, and that's not exactly how the real world works. So learning about cars is something that is a very concrete example that resonates very well with me. I've done jobs like construction jobs and manual labor just for the sole fact of like learning how to do specific skills in that field, even though it might not be something that completely enthralls me, but it could after a while if I learned how to do it successfully and did some trial and error with it. And I think that's like anything in life is you can't just expect to come in to the idea of not doing drugs for the rest of your life and be like, oh, this is going to be real easy. I got this in the bag. Like, I'm going to travel across the country and expect everything to be smooth sailing. Like, life isn't just handed to you. The most rewarding parts of it is when you go out and try to grasp it.
I got to tell you, that's funny. So you can't. I can't anticipate everything, right? But I am a person who likes to, try to plan for every scenario, or at least in my head, I'll not maybe plan for every scenario, but I'll have in my head every scenario that could happen.
Plan for the worst and hope for the best is what my mom said.
Right. But so, I what I'm finding is that, the first couple weeks of my trip were primarily with people I hadn't connected with, or I hadn't reconnected with since before I got sober. And so some of them I talked to on the phone, or I talked to through Facebook mostly, or texted, but hadn't seen face to face, and now of course, not being able to hug. It's been funny because they know what I'm doing, and I tell people what I'm doing, and I can point out, like my aunt Nancy. I love you, Aunt Nancy, if you're watching. But she made it a point when we sat down to order. I met her for dinner, her and then my uncle and my cousin met us later, and we sat down to order, and we ordered drinks, and she said, I'm gonna have a iced tea and lemonade. I said, oh, that sounds good. Yeah, I'll have an Arnold Palmer. But when they came, when the waitress,
that's my drink.
Well, right, but my aunt Nancy seems to think that it normally has vodka in it. I don't know why, but that's what she seems to think. And so when we ordered, she's like, but mine has normal, like with the vodka, and not that one. Just make sure there's no alcohol in that. Like, she was the one being proactive to make sure I didn't get booze in my drink. And I'm like, it's okay. I'm not gonna suddenly, fly off the handle and be like, "Ooh, booze," And I had a different experience, a very kind and compassionate experience with my former high school band director, Rob Reimer. And if you're watching, hi, Rob. But he called me and he's like, "Hey, so I have to ask you a couple questions." And I'm like, "Oh God, what are you gonna ask me?" And I'm like, "I'm open, anything." And I'm thinking, "Oh shit," But he's like, so if we go out to lunch, can we go somewhere that has a bar? I'm like, oh yeah, that's fine. I said, you'll be okay with that? I'm like, Rob, you're fine, and you can drink if you want to. He's like, oh no, I would never do that to you. I'm like, no, it's not about me, it's about you. You don't have to worry about me on that one. But it was kind, it was compassionate, and I don't think he's a big drinker. But the last time I had seen him before that, we kind of got a little tipsy. So he was kind of mindful of that.
And there's that fine line of being like sensitive and overtly even weirder in one direction. Like, I'd be much more comfortable with you. This is my experience. I would be a lot more comfortable with you getting drunk in front of me than you going into another room, drinking, and coming back drunk because you're afraid that's going to affect me worse. Or you think I'm going to be better off by not seeing you get loaded? Right. And I just see you and I'm like, why are you hiding this from me? I'm not like 12. You know what I'm saying? I'm not your parents or anything. I just don't do that anymore. And I think that there is a very fine line that, friends and family and everyone kind of like tread. But as soon as I kind of lay the law of the land of just like, yeah, you're good. And don't ask again. Thanks, Chip. Just for you, baby. Just for you. And
I thought it was for me. And I love a man in uniform.
I know you do. And I guess what I'm trying to say is like it's something as small as when I go to my friend's house and she says, "Hey, I actually just made some pink lemonade. You want some?" Like is conscientiously going out of her way to make sure that I feel comfortable instead of saying, oh, are we allowed to drink like every single time that I'm over at your house? Like, come on. So I think that comes with a lot of practice and everything. What did Honesty say something?
Well, well, she said about, do we have security at McShin now? But
it's me, baby.
It's the security of having Alex back in the house. So.
Alex is our new bouncer.
Hey, Nathan, I wanted to ask you real quick because so you said from Texas, where are you going next?
So I'm in Dallas until Sunday, and then Sunday I'm driving to Midland, Texas, and I guess I'm gonna meet a group there probably Monday, and from there I don't know anybody in El Paso. I put El Paso on the map because it was. From there, I'm going to San Diego. If I stop along the way, they're not really planned stops. And then I go from San Diego straight up the coast, all the way up the coast to Seattle. And stopping along the way, maybe I want to stop for myself and do some hiking. I may actually go dark. Excuse me, for a day or two and go completely digital free. I think that might benefit me at that point. And then from there, from Seattle, I bounce south and east to Boise, Idaho, where I hope to see my cousin Stacy, and their family and her family. And Boise, Idaho is supposed to be gorgeous. There's a place called Craters of the Moon that I'm kind of eager to see. It looks really weird and cool. And then from there to Salt Lake City to see Evan Dunn, who does some incredible work there. And from there to Las Vegas. And I'll be in Las Vegas for several days. And then I think the Grand Canyon and what do we call them? The Wee Canyons.
The Wee Canyons.
The not so grand.
The not so grand. AKA the Wee Canyons.
I don't remember.
I'm actually glad that you mentioned going dark. That was something that crossed my mind when you were talking about collecting memories and not experiencing the experiences. That is just, take the ability to collect those memories off the table. You know what I'm saying? Like, just completely take it off the table. That was one thing that helped me was in different things in life was my mom told me, like, just don't give yourself another choice. Like, you have to do what you have to do. Don't give yourself another choice, because as soon as you do, you're going to pick that thing. And she was right. You were right, Mom. And
how did that feel?
Now I try to just not give myself as many choices. As soon as I'm like given something, I do it without trying to put it off till later unless I absolutely have to.
Yeah.
Generally, I'm still a procrastinator by nature, but that's for like personal things more.
So another question real quick, Nathan, was so if anyone wants to help contribute to this, you still have that going on? Like you're still working with that?
I appreciate you mentioning that, Todd.
You're still taking money.
Well, yeah, and it's on my to-do list of updating and making sure it kind of looks pretty or whatever. I don't know, but I'm it's expensive. And as much as I love the trip and everything, absolutely I could use a little more help. And if you don't have money to contribute, which is fine, I get that. We're all in tough times right now. But if you have I don't know, hotel points or can put me up somewhere, maybe, I don't know. That would be nice too. I'll tell you, one of the nicest things. So you may have seen a picture of me. You probably didn't know. A couple days ago when I was leaving Houston, I saw my Aunt Grace and my Uncle Harry, and then my great aunt, my great uncle. So my grandmother, whose birthday I was at in the beginning of the month, it was her sister. And they're in they're 86, I think. And I saw them, and my cousin Peggy, they put together a basket of goodies. And there's a picture of me with this basket of goodies. It's all, food and stuff, some homemade preserves that she made, and then snacks and whatnot. And I know I've got this big cheesy grin because I'm, look like I'm thrilled to have this basket. What I forgot to take a picture of and show, and I'll send this, is that my Aunt Grace is an incredible artist. And she had taken a photograph of my grandfather, and she had hand drawn that and turned it into Christmas cards because he's wearing a Santa cap. And my grandfather died about 2.5 years ago, so right before I got clean. So she gave me a bunch of those, and that was absolutely the it's one of the highlights of the trip so far. You know, that and you probably saw the picture of my friend Sue in also in Houston. Alex, you'll get a kick out of this. She brought 2 clean sheets with her, and she put a sheet over her entire body just so that she could hug me when I met her, and she kept the second sheet so that we could hug when she left me. So.
Oh,
And I put the sheet over me for that, you know, for when she left. So
what a clever lady.
It's a cool thing. And I don't remember the last time I saw her. But I've known her since I was 13, I think. Sue and I were in 8th grade. I mean, we were we're the same grade. We graduated together. So that was really cool. But yeah. So a lot of people have been helping me out with, like, Joseph and Todd. They put me up for a night in Austin, and Joseph and I went out. I don't know if you saw those pictures, Alex, but the meal I had yesterday with Joseph, wow. And I have leftovers in the car. I'm actually going to eat them as soon as I get off the phone here. But wow, best barbecue of my freaking life. Like, just and just, oh my God.
That's
wow.
the leftovers. That's the leftovers. Wow.
I hope they were refrigerated in the process.
They've just been sitting in his hot Dallas, Texas car all day.
Next thing we find out is it's like what's the game when you were a kid?
Fear Factor?
No, Nathan has dysentery.
Oh,
so
Oregon Trail.
Oregon
You'll be
Trail.
going up to Oregon soon anyway.
I'm leaving a trail. So
Sorry,
yeah.
I had to get some ribs in because you kept saying, "Oh no." I posted this picture. Actually, Alex, you probably didn't see it because you were busy dealing with jail. So sorry, I had to get some back at you.
So yes, please donate money. There's a thing. There's a GoFundMe. GoFundMe, please. I could use a little help. Always, just a couple bucks here or there would be great. I want to do actually.
Nathan.
Yeah.
Feed Nathan.
Oh,
That's
feed
what
Nathan.
I said.
Hey, well,
Feed Nathan.
Matt Connor put in some money. Thank you so much for that. I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I apologize if I missed somebody. My Aunt Lee and my Uncle Dave in Delaware put in some money. Thank you for that. Honesty, thank you so much for your contribution. And of course, Ryan Hampton and the Recovery Advocacy Project. Thank you so much. And as always, McShin, thank you so much for helping me help me get clean, for one thing, showing me a life worth living, and helping me to develop a life worth sharing, and for supporting me on this journey. So yeah, feed Nathan.
Nathan, we love you. I'm so proud of you. Is that what you're grateful for? You kind of answered your famous last question there without even getting the question.
Well, I live gratitude, man. I have to, because like you were saying earlier, it's easy.
Daily texts.
What's that?
I miss your daily gratitude texts.
I haven't done that in ages. I will get. You know what? I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate you saying that. I'm grateful you said that. I'm grateful that
You said that.
grateful for that. I'm grateful to be able to do this and stay connected. I'm grateful to be able to do this and recognize, to identify some of my character defects and work with them a little bit. I have work to do, so I'm identifying work that I still need to do. But I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for being able to take this journey and have people around me, I meet along the way, and people, still at McShin that are helping me and keeping me accountable, but also, reminding me that I'm still loved when there are moments I'm like, want to throw in the towel. And I've had a few moments, so yeah, I'm grateful.
Good stuff. I loved catching up with you. And I can't wait to talk to you behind the scenes to get some hot goss. You can spill that tea.
Hot goss.
What's really going on. Name some names that we can't do on air. And buddy, I'm really proud of you. I love you, man. You're doing a great job out there. Yeah, hit that GoFundMe page that Todd just put up. Nathan, seriously.
Otherwise, I'll be eating 3-day-old leftovers that have been boiling in the car to prevent Nathan from getting dysentery fun.
Nathan, go fund Nathan's dysentery. Go fund his surgery. Todd, it's a pleasure. I love you too, man.
Love you,
Nathan,
Todd.
I'll talk to you next week. Probably sooner than then. This has been Get in the Herd. Get out there and do something helpful today. It's good to be back. I appreciate all of y'all. Thank you very much.
I'm waiting for music.
One thing we do here, we always educate our participants. I want you to leave here after your 30, 60, 90 days or however long you stay and leave. I want you to be educated about the disease of addiction, about substance use disorders, what you need to do to personally recover. But I want you to know why we don't have the support we should have. I want you to know where all the funding goes, what the thinking is of our culture, why we're the way we are. And just for the record, everybody put it right in. I hereby deputize each and every one of you as an ambassador to be a face and voice of recovery from here on out. You've just been deputized. You just became ambassadors of a recovery movement, an authentic recovery movement. What authentic means is about people in recovery themselves. This is our call to action.